Today we are going to be making a couple different recipes from the Mediterranean diet. Now the Mediterranean diet is really focused on eating lots and lots of fruits and vegetables, consuming beans, healthy proteins that are lean, and lots of whole grains as well. So what you might think of the Mediterranean diet is a little bit different than the actual diet that we are recommended by the dietary guidelines for Americans. So if you were to go to the Mediterranean region today, it is very different in their style that they eat than how they did traditionally. So the Mediterranean diet is really great for reducing your risk of diseases and really helping you to have an overall healthy lifestyle. So we're going to get started. We've got two different recipes that we're going to be making today. We have a lunch salad, and then we also have a super tomato soup. So we'll get started with that super tomato soup first. And we have a few different ingredients. So you're going to start with just a regular saute pan and add a little bit of olive oil to that. And now olive oil is a big part of Mediterranean cooking. So we try to use oils that are going to be liquid at room temperature versus solid at room temperature because they're better for our body. You think about if you are pouring down, you saute or brown some ground beef and you don't want to put that down the drain, right? Because it's going to clog your pipes. Same thing for our body. We want to make sure that we are taking care of our body and we want to use good oils for that. So I actually already had my pan on low, so it is getting warm, and I just added our olive oil. We're going to let that heat up just a little bit. And what we're going to start off with is some garlic. Now, I love fresh garlic. A lot of people will use just the mince that's in a can or in maybe a glass jar. That is perfectly fine, but it does hurt my heart a little bit because I just love fresh garlic. Has a completely different flavor. And this is what our garlic clove looks like, our garlic bulb. And then you can break it apart into individual cloves. And I will show you that in just a little bit when we start chopping. So we've got 3 to 4 cloves here. I'm gonna dump that all in and crank up our stove top a little bit here. And then we're also gonna add some onion. Now this is about a cup of chopped onion. You can also just do 1 medium onion. And we have 2 to 3 carrots that have been shredded. So I did this ahead of time. You can also buy the pre-shredded carrots in the bag at the grocery store. And we're just gonna let that cook for about 5 minutes. So I'm gonna mix that all together. Get it to look real nice and tasty. We wanna make sure the oil is coating all sides of our vegetables. All right, so we'll let that cook just a little bit, about 5 minutes, just until those vegetables are tender. All right, so we're gonna move over here to our lunch salad while our super tomato soup is getting started. And we've got a couple different ingredients here that I have already prepped ahead of time. The first thing is brown rice. And now this is really important as part of our Mediterranean diet. We wanna eat at least half of our grains to be whole grains, and brown rice is a great way to do that. So this is about 2 cups. It's already prepared. We have several different vegetables here. We've got squash, red bell pepper, carrots that are also shredded, and celery. Now this is a great recipe because you can do any vegetables that you have in your kitchen. So I call this kind of one of my fridge dumps. So if you have a lot of stuff in your fridge that you need to get rid of, it might be going bad soon, or maybe you have some leftover vegetables from different recipes you've cooked, and they're just all these different odd and end vegetables that you're not sure what to do with. Throw them all together in this lunch salad. It's delicious. You then want to add some beans. So we want about 2 cups of our whole grain. You could do anything: quinoa, bulgur, brown rice. You want about 3 cups of chopped vegetables. This might be a little bit extra, but I don't like to waste. So if I'm going to chop up a whole squash, I'm going to go ahead and put that all in there. So should be about 3 cups. And then we want about a cup of beans. Similar concept. If I have a whole can of beans, I'm just going to use all of that. Recipes are not to be followed exactly. They're kind of just a guide for you. So you put what you like in your recipes. So this is just our white beans. And then we also have some grilled chicken here, which I grilled ahead of time. If you have any other protein, you could do extra beans if you want to omit the meat. Or you could do something else, ground beef, ground turkey, shrimp would be delicious. Really anything. Like I said, this is a dump recipe. So just find things in your fridge, put it all together, and it will taste good. So we are going to go ahead and get started with that. And first I'll show you guys how to chop some of these vegetables. Let me give this a quick stir so we can hear it sizzling over here. And I'll turn that down just a little bit. And we will go ahead and start chopping some of our vegetables, just to go over some of our knife skills here. So the first tip for chopping vegetables is you need a really, really good knife. Now, this is a chef's knife. Chef's knife is usually about 8 inches. And really, it just gives you a lot of room to work with when you are going to be chopping. So when we're holding our chef's knife, we want to make sure that we hold it close to the blade. We don't want to be further around the handle because it's loose and you don't have as much control over your knife. So the more control you have over that, the less likely you are going to be to hit something that you don't intend to. So we are going to grab it by the top closer to the blade, and you don't want to be putting your finger out. That's putting a lot of pressure on that finger. You want to just hold it nice and firmly in your hand. Here we have our red bell pepper, and for any of our bell peppers, a good way to chop this is what we call top it and tail it. That way we get as much of the pepper, we have less food waste. So we're going to start with topping it. So you cut off that top area, flip it on over, and you tail it. Now, for this part, you can just take it and you can actually push out that green center part. So now you have the entire top of the pepper that you can use. There's limited food waste. You have a little bit, but very limited. Set that to the side. You've got your entire bottom. Same thing. You can use this whole thing. We have limited food waste. Now for our center here, you're going to make a small slit, and then you just slowly are going to cut out and roll out that bell pepper. And we throw that away. Unless you want to put that in the ground and try to grow your own bell pepper. All right, so now we're going to slice this up. So I usually slice it in parts, and then we use what's called a rocking motion to chop our vegetables. And this is by keeping that tip of your blade on the board, and then you're just rocking the rest of the knife. All right, so you've got some nice chopped red bell pepper here. And then you can do the same thing with all the rest of this. Go ahead and chop it all and use it for later because we already have our bell pepper chopped. And then some of the other ingredients that we're using, we have 2 stalks of celery in our lunch salad. So I typically cut off the ends of that, and then you can use the leaves at the top. I've already cut those off, but I'll cut off the other end. So I cut off both ends of our celery. I like to strip it, so I'll cut it right down the middle. And then you could even cut it even further if you want it to be smaller pieces. So you could cut it a few more times. And then same concept. So we're keeping that end of the knife on our cutting board, and we're slowly rocking. And we're keeping our fingers out of the way, just slowly moving that food towards the knife. We can smell those onions and garlic over here. It smells delicious. So we've got all that done. Now another tip for you, you don't want to be using the end of your blade to scrape with. That's going to start to dull your knife, and a sharp knife is your friend. So you want to make sure that we're using the back of that knife to move that food. And then you could even chop it finer. So it depends on how big you want these pieces. Now I like mine really small, just so that in every single bite we get different flavors in that lunch salad. The smaller it is, you get a little bit of extra crunch in there and extra flavor all around with every bite. So you can make this further into a minced celery. So that's pretty good. We'll go ahead and throw that in our pile. All right. Now I did want to show you guys how to do some garlic here because I didn't realize a lot of people don't use garlic. And when I think about growing up, my mom didn't use a lot of fresh garlic. And if she did, it wasn't one of my jobs as a child. So I didn't really have a lot of experience with using fresh garlic until probably my college years. So what you do, you just kind of start breaking apart this bulb. And there's tons of cloves in a bulb. And the reason why I recommend buying fresh garlic, it keeps for a really long time. You can throw it in your refrigerator and it's very, very cheap. You get a lot of garlic with it. So when you get your clove, now to me, you can never have enough garlic. I absolutely love it. I add extra when a recipe calls for it. So you can take a big clove and count that as 2 cloves, depending on your recipe. Or if you're like me and you want a little extra, you can count that big one as just 1. This recipe for our super tomato soup calls for 3 to 4 cloves. So I put 3 to 4 big ones because I really like that fresh garlic. Now there's a way that you can do this with a knife. I have never perfected that. I just like to use the palm of my hand. It's probably a little bit safer. So you take the palm of your hand, which is really nice and strong, and you just squish your garlic. This is a little bit older garlic. If it doesn't quite crack like you like to hear, that's okay, but it will likely start to go ahead and peel open. And there you go. That's your fresh garlic. And same concept here. So we just want to mince this nice and small, watching your fingers, cuffing those under, and we go each way to chop that. All right. And you can keep going further with that to make it even smaller. And it just smells absolutely delicious. It's so good. All right. So we have our vegetables chopped. We've got everything else done. We are gonna throw this together in just a moment. First, we're gonna go ahead back over to our super tomato soup and do a few more steps there.
Sweetie, will you turn that down, please?
Keep life exciting, even when it's not. Watch TV everywhere from Star Communications.
All right, so we've got our vegetables have been really nice and getting caramelized over here. Next, you're gonna add a few more ingredients. I'm gonna turn this down just a bit, and we are gonna add just a little bit of sugar to offset that tomato. Tomato is really acidic and you wanna kind of balance it out. So this is just a teaspoon of sugar. You want to add a 1/4 teaspoon of ground pepper and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. And I just mix these together. And then we wanna use some basil. So the key here is to use some nice big basil leaves. The Mediterranean diet is all about using fresh herbs in your cooking to help flavor your food. So I just break these up with my hand. You can throw them in whole. You can chop them. We are going to be blending this up. So you don't even have to do this step. When you break the herbs though, it helps to give it a little bit of, releases those those oils that are in the herbs, and it helps to really make your dish more flavored. So this is supposed to sit for another 5 minutes or so and just cook down a little bit. After this step, we're gonna throw all of this with 2 cans of diced tomatoes with no salt added, preferably. If you cannot find that, that is okay. Just make sure that you rinse those. However, in this recipe, we are using it undrained. So you wanna have some of that water content. If you choose to rinse, just make sure you're adding a little bit of extra water. And then we are also adding about 14 ounces or 1 can of chicken broth. I had just the carton, so I just measured it out to 14 ounces here. And this is supposed to simmer on the stove for about an hour. I prefer to throw this in an electric pressure cooker because it takes 2/3 less time. It's about 20 minutes in a pressure cooker. So you can really speed this up. But if you have the time, you want to just let it simmer and make your house smell delicious, you can do that. So up next, we will throw all of this in our pressure cooker and get that started. And then that will be ready. We'll do a couple more steps and we'll be done with that. We'll go back to our lunch salad and finish that recipe up.
After completing my contract, I still have to buy out of it? Come on. Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping home secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody trying to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
So we're back to our lunch salad here, which, like I said, is one of those dump recipes. Really great for just throwing things together. So we're going to start with our rice or any type of whole grain. We've got brown rice here. This is about 2 cups. So we're going to throw that into our bowl. And then next, we're going to add our vegetables. This is about 3 cups of vegetables. And we've got celery, yellow squash, red bell pepper, and carrots in here. So it is a really pretty color. And we tell kids all the time to eat the rainbow. So same thing applies to adults and kids, no matter your age. We want to make sure that we're eating lots of different colors because different colors have different nutrients for our body. And that is what helps us to get the vitamins that we need to live a happy and healthy life. So mixing that all together. Up next, we have a protein of choice. So this is about 6 ounces of chicken that I just grilled the chicken ahead of time. Like I said, if you have anything else, if you had steak, if you had a ground meat, shrimp that you wanted to throw in here, you could do canned chicken. I've done that in class before and it still turned out really great. So whatever is accessible to you, we'll throw that all in here. If you don't want to choose a meat, you can absolutely just do extra beans. And we're doing a little bit of extra beans anyways, just because that's what we had on hand. These are going to be our white beans, so Great Northern beans. And I love these because they're just very versatile. Now for these beans, I had to rinse these because I could not find the low sodium. So if you can't find no salt added or the reduced sodium, then go ahead and rinse those really well, and you'll be able to remove about 30 to 40% of that sodium from the canned beans. Same thing applies to your vegetables if you're struggling with finding no salt added canned vegetables. All right. Now last, we've got our dressing. So you can either mix these together. We've got balsamic vinegar and olive oil. You can mix those together ahead of time. I just like to save steps, so we're just gonna dump it all in. This is about 6 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. I'll just set that in there. And then we've got 6 tablespoons of our olive oil. And then you just give it all a good stir. And it's done. Now this is one of those recipes to me that tastes better the next day. So this is a really good one if You need to prep something ahead of time, maybe for your meals for the week. That's why it's called a lunch salad, because it's great for lunch. It tastes even better when it's marinated in the fridge for at least a few hours to a day. I like mine cold. You could absolutely heat it up. Some people might be weirded out by eating cold rice, but I think it tastes really good all together. Now there is olive oil in here, so whenever you put it in the fridge, it's gonna start to solidify a little bit. But when you sit it back on the counter just for a few minutes, it will start to come back to room temperature, and that oil will start to liquefy a little bit. All right, so that is our lunch salad. That is all done, ready to eat. We're gonna finish up our tomato soup.
You're out for an evening on the town. Finally a chance to relax and forget that you left your front door completely unlocked. Fortunately, you just installed a security system from Star Communications. With just your cell phone, you can check on your house, lock it down, light it up, and get back to relaxing.
You forgot to put Buster in his crate.
Unfortunately, we can't help with that. Security and automation from Star Communications. Call today to find out more.
So we're gonna finish up our super tomato soup here. Went ahead and put our soup into our blender, and we're just gonna blend this up about halfway. We just put half of that soup in here, and then we'll do the other half. So we're doing this in smaller batches. So we'll go ahead and get started. All right, that looks good. So if you like your soup a little bit more chunky, you could just blend half of this and put the other half in there with it, so that it would still have a little bit more texture if that is your style. I'm gonna take that lid off and just pour that in here. You can see some chunks are still in there, so I like a little bit more texture, which is why I didn't blend it for quite as long. But it is up to you. You make this your recipe and what your taste, what you like in your food. So we're just gonna pour the other half of this in here. Now, one thing I think I failed to mention is that we do have sun-dried tomatoes in this recipe. And sun-dried tomatoes aren't something we might buy regularly at the grocery store. So I will show you what those look like. We only have 3 sun-dried tomatoes in this. So this is what sun-dried tomatoes look like. There are many different brands. This is just the one that I grabbed, and it is typically by the tomatoes in the produce aisle. So if you have there's kind of a kiosk that they have, the tomatoes, garlic, basil will be there, and there's some shelves underneath that, which is usually where sun-dried tomatoes will also be. Sometimes they're packed in oil, sometimes they are just dried like this. And I'll pull some out for you. I absolutely love sun-dried tomatoes. They give food so much flavor, and there's not a whole lot of ingredients to them. It's just dried tomatoes. So this is what they look like. You just throw those into your soup before you cook it for that hour, or before you throw it into your electric pressure cooker. So just a few of those. And we will finish. Let's make sure I put my lid on there. And we'll blend the other half up. And pour the rest into our bowl. This should make about 6 servings. And then you're just gonna top it with some fresh basil. I went ahead and chopped this up into little ribbons. So we're just gonna top that. Now, if you were doing individual bowls to plate this, you could top each plate with that basil just to give it some extra eye appeal. And it smells delicious. All right, so that's it for our super tomato soup. Really tasty, really delicious, and has a lot of flavor. Join us next time to talk about how to change up our protein in our Going Med. So we're transitioning to eating the Mediterranean style diet, and next week we're going to talk about how to change up your protein and choose healthier protein options. Look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day.